Hi, folks. It's been a minute since we have touched base on a video lecture, so I wanted to post this one for you. I'm going to go over a few things that are really important, primarily what the research rough draft is going to look like and how you can use some of the skills we've learned, like quotation sandwiches and incorporating research to bolster that rough draft. So obviously, remember in your introduction, you want to consider your audience, keep your audience in mind and what they are likely to know about your topic before reading your paper. For example, one of my students is writing about vaping and its prevalence in teens. So if you are writing about teens and vaping, almost all of your college student audience will know what vaping is, but they might not know some statistics or some recent legislation or recent conversations around vaping. So you might want to provide context for them, especially if that's going to be a big part of your argument. Remember to start broad or general and get increasingly narrow. If you remember the keyhole method that we talked about, where it's kind of like a triangle where the large base is at the top and the point is at the bottom, that's what your introduction should look like. So if your audience is college students, make sure to provide some context for them and start broad with something that grabs their attention. Remember to try and hook your reader with either a question or maybe a surprising fact. Or a thought-provoking anecdote. An anecdote is just a personal story. So if you have a personal story that you'd like to share in regards to your topic, then that might bring in your reader a little bit. For example, if you are writing about vaping, then you could say something either shocking or a personal anecdote, like when I was in high school, 6 out of my 10 friends in my friend group were vaping. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a good example to kind of hook your reader into the topic at hand and interest them and get them to want to read more. It also might be a good idea to work on, write, or rewrite your introduction paragraph after you finish the rest of the draft. So the body paragraphs and the conclusions, because normally those are easier to start with. Your introduction is going to have your thesis statement at the end, being the narrowest point of your essay, right? It should be the last sentence of your introduction. So make sure that your argumentative your argumentative thesis statement appears at the end of that introduction. And remember that that thesis statement is the main argument of the essay, and it's the thing that you are working to prove. So it's your main point of persuasion that you're trying to get across. It should be clear, direct, and argumentative. So for example, a weak thesis statement regarding teens and vaping is teens and children vaping has become a big issue with the rise in catered advertising. While that might be true, it is more of an observation than it is an argument. So to make it more argumentative, make it stronger, clearer, and more direct, you can use this stronger thesis statement. Vape companies should have restrictions on catering their advertisements to teens and children. This is a should statement. It's a statement with the word should in it, implying that there is some action that should take place to make the world a more positive place, right? So notice that in the strong thesis statement, it is actionable. It is encouraging an audience or a company or some legislation to actually take action. So if you are struggling with creating an argumentative thesis statement for yourself, it might be helpful to include a word should, the word should or should not, to make it a bit more argumentative. That moves us to our body paragraphs. So you're going to have at least 3 body paragraphs, just like in Unit 3. And remember that the parts to a strong body paragraph are very clear. There are 4 parts. And if you can remember these 4 parts or use this as kind of like a template when you're writing your own body paragraphs in your researched argumentative essay, then you'll already have a well-developed paragraph. So the first thing that is in every body paragraph is a topic sentence that is transitioned into with a transitional phrase. So a topic sentence that discusses the main point or claim of the paragraph. Typically, it's a claim in research-based argumentative essays, but it's either a claim or something that needs support, right? So if I'm just going to use the example again, if I'm arguing about restrictions on advertisements to children and teens when in regards to nicotine vapes, then one of my topic sentences might be the first reason that vape companies should be restricted by who they can advertise to is blank, right? And then I give one of my reasons. You can do that for every body paragraph if you find that that's useful for you, or you can change it up a little bit. You can change up the transitional phrase. But in your first body paragraph, it might be good to start with my first point is, or first, to begin, things like that. The second part to a strong body paragraph is evidence to support the claim that you make in your topic sentence. In this case, your evidence will be coming from the research that you do. So those should be quotes, or in some cases paraphrase, but I highly encourage you to use direct quotes from the researched articles that you found to support your own claim. So again, if I'm making a claim about teens and vaping and advertisement, then the research that I include should relate and prove that my claim is true in regards to teens and vaping and advertisement. I say here that the evidence should be incorporated into the quotation sandwich. We'll look at that a little later. The third part of a strong body paragraph is the explanation of evidence. So how the evidence that you include in part 2 relates to or proves your claim that you made in the topic sentence. So you'll notice that they're kind of building on each other. 1 is the topic sentence, 2 is the evidence to support that topic sentence, and 3 is an explanation as to how that evidence relates to the topic sentence. The last thing that a strong body paragraph includes is a sentence tying all the claim that you made, the research that you included, all of that good stuff back to your original argument or your original thesis statement. You have to remind your reader at the end of every paragraph what we're doing here, what work we're trying to do, and what argument we're trying to prove. So earlier when I mentioned the quotation sandwich, this is what I was talking about. I provided this to you before, but I'll go over it in detail here. So when you are incorporating research in the form of direct quotations into your essay, which is the primary way you should be incorporating your research, this is how you will successfully incorporate it and give credit where credit is due. I say here on the left, when writing a research paper for English 1101 or 1102, it's a good approach to use direct quotes when referencing your research. This helps you avoid plagiarism and misrepresenting the original source. So this is one of the reasons, one of the many reasons, why I encourage you to use direct quotes from the research when you can, when at all possible, so that you are not misrepresenting the original work or accidentally plagiarizing. To incorporate those quotes successfully, you need to introduce the quote, include the quote itself, and then cite the quote. We call this a quotation sandwich. So on the right side of the screen here, you'll see a sandwich that I created myself, and it is made of 3 parts: the bread, the meat, veggies, or peanut butter, whatever you put in the middle of your sandwich, and then the second piece of bread, right? So bread number 1, your first piece of bread, is going to be the introduction of research. Here, you will lead up to the research you plan to include by either introducing the author, the title of the work, or both. So here's an example. All of this is a made-up example, by the way. In his article, Climate Change and Its Effect on Bee Population, Greg Johnson states, okay, so the title of the article is Climate Change and Its Effect on Bee Population. Greg Johnson is the author of that article. And so this is a good introduction phrase or sentence to lead into the direct quote that you're going to use from the article. Which leads us to the meat or veggies or peanut butter of your sandwich, the research itself. Here you'll include the quote, or in some cases paraphrase reference to your research. So example, the honeybee population is rapidly decreasing each year is a quote from Greg Johnson's article, right? So when you're incorporating quotes from your own research, make sure to put quotation marks around anything that you take directly from the article and give proper credit to the original source. So far we have in his article, Climate Change and Its Effect on Bee Population, Greg Johnson states, quote, the honeybee population is rapidly decreasing each year, end quote. So now we need the last part of our sandwich, which is the citation for the research. Here you will cite the research by including the last name of the author and the page number of the research in parentheses at the end of the sentence. So Climate Change and Its Effect on Bee Population is the article. The author is Greg Johnson. So we will put Johnson in the parentheses with the page number that the research appeared on in the original article. So the page number you're going to have to find on the PDF of the article. You're going to have to look for the page number because it will not be immediately apparent to you, right? So you'll have to go find what page number the page that you are getting a quote from appears on. But you will have an open parentheses, the last name, the page number, and then a close parentheses with a period at the very end. So this is giving credit to Greg Johnson and his article and what page that article of that article you are quoting from. Here is an example from a sample student essay that I have already given you to kind of look at, but this is just one of the body paragraphs. Here you will see an incorporation of research with the quotation sandwich. So it should successfully convey the evidence from your research. Here is a sample paragraph. So they say, to begin, distance learning classes are typically not as effective as in-person classes. You'll notice that that is their topic sentence, right? That's their part 1 of the body paragraph. There's a special learning dynamic that occurs with in-person classes that distance learning does not mirror. And then we have our evidence, which is our part 2. In the article, Students' Perceptions About E-Learning in Business Management Classrooms at Higher Education in Pakistan. It's kind of a long title, but that's the title of the article. Dr. Murad Uzma, who is the author of the article, concluded in a study comparing different forms of learning that, quote, Here's the quote: "Face-to-face on-campus classes are preferred the most, with 73% positive response." And then an end quotation mark. Then we have the citation itself with the last name of the author, Uzma, and the page number that quote appeared on in the original text, so page 42. We have an end closing parentheses and then a period at the end. So that is all the evidence that you're providing. That's the part 2 of a body paragraph. This indicates that even after the students had experienced both in-person classes and distance learning, the majority preferred a face-to-face learning environment. So that sentence is directly explaining how that quote that she used is useful and supportive of the claim she makes in her topic sentence. Here are some examples of using the quotation sandwich when you may have some parts missing. So for example, in this first one, this is referencing a journal article, and you have the author's name and page number. So you have everything that you need. In a study conducted in Virginia, Natalie Arbatov found that that is your first spread. That is you introducing either the article's title or the author's name or both. Then you include the citation, the quotation itself. Over 75% of juvenile offenders vape or use e-cigarettes. That is in quotation marks, indicating that it came directly from the outside research. Then after that, you have the second bread in parentheses, your citation. Arbatov is the last name of our author, so we put that in the citation, and then we put the page number that quote appeared on from the original article. Okay, that's just like the example we used. So what about if it's published by an organization, so it doesn't have an author and it might not have a page number? This happens a lot of the time when you are working with like a government organization or a publicly funded organization. They often publish studies or articles with that so many people have worked on, so many authors have worked on, that they publish it under the group's name instead of one particular author. So this example uses the CDC, or Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, to as an example. The same applies for things like the World Health Organization, Federal Bureau of Investigation, things like that, right? So in this case, the article itself has a title, but we do not have a author. And because it's a web source, we also don't have a page number. So the article, quote, "RNA vaccines, a comprehensive study," that's the title of the article, states that, and here's the piece of referenced research, "the majority of American citizens over the age of 65 have received one or more COVID-19 vaccine." That's the peanut butter in our sandwich. And then we cite it in the second bread of our quotation sandwich. But because we don't have an author and because we don't have page numbers, we reference the organization itself. So the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And there's no page number to reference, so we leave that out. What if you have multiple authors with page numbers? So this happens a lot in the sciences and the social sciences, where articles will be published with several, up to like 30 sometimes, authors on one single article. Lots of people work together in those fields. So when you are referencing an article like that, you reference the first author listed, and then you do this thing with a Latin phrase called et al, where you say "and all the rest" is the Latin phrase. So here, it says, "Sarah West, who is our first author, and other researchers at the University of Michigan found that, quote, students who do not eat breakfast are 30% less likely to maintain a 4.0 GPA. There's the end quotation mark, and then the citation that follows is West, who's our first author listed, et al, et.al, meaning "and all the rest." And then we still have the page number that quote appeared on in the article, 83. We have a closed parentheses, and then we have a period. This last one refers to a book with an author and with page numbers. You do the same thing you would with an article that has an author and a page number. The only difference is book titles are in italics, whereas article titles are in quotation marks. I'm going to say that again. Article titles, journal article titles, are in quotation marks, and book titles are in italics. The rule is any long form piece, so a book, a movie, a video game, a play, all of those are in italics. Short form pieces like articles, essays, poems, those are all in quotation marks. So that's something good to remember. We also have the option for a counter argument paragraph. Some of you have already started working on counter argument paragraphs in your argumentative essays. When you make an argument in an academic essay, you're writing for an audience that may not agree with you. In fact, most of the time when we are making arguments, we are trying to persuade our audience, right? Which means they might not agree with us to begin with. In fact, your argument is worth making in the first place because your thesis is not obvious. It's not an observation. It is an argument. So to everyone who considers the question you are asking or the topic you're addressing, in order to make a convincing argument, sometimes the author may need to address these potential counter arguments. You don't need to address every counter argument. Rather, you should engage with counter arguments or arguments from the opposition. When doing so allows you to strengthen your own. You can explain how it holds up in relation to your argument. You can explain how their argument is refutable, or you can rebut their argument. The counterargument paragraph typically comes right before your conclusion paragraph. It addresses the opposition and counterclaims or counterclaims, and then refutes them as either not important enough for rebuttal or refutes them with evidence from research. So if you find evidence that refutes some counterarguments in your research, you can use it in your counterargument paragraph. And the structure of that paragraph is similar to your other body paragraphs, where you make your claim, you support it with evidence, and you tie that evidence back to the thesis. And then lastly, your conclusion. Just as in most essays, the conclusion of a research paper should look to the future and broaden out from the particular topic that you start with. So it should begin with a transitional phrase like in conclusion or altogether, something like that from the last section of your thesis. It can also help to think about what we still need to know about the topic. So what are some things that we still have questions about or still need to do research on? In your conclusion, you can ask yourself, what might we expect or hope to learn about this topic in the future? What else needs to be examined or answered? And how will this knowledge help us in other ways? One thing I like to do in my conclusions is consider a world in which my argument either does or does not come true. If I'm arguing that vaping should be banned, in my conclusion, I can say, if vaping is banned, all of these wonderful things will happen. Children will stop being addicted to nicotine. We will have less addiction in the country, things like that. But I can also do the opposite, where I say, if vaping does not get banned, all of these bad things will happen, right? Students, like teens will continue to deal with addiction issues. People will still pour money into nicotine products that are a waste of their money and their body. So you can either paint a utopic picture where your argument does come true and things are better for us, or you can paint kind of a depressing image of a world in which your argument does not come true and we are worse for wear because of that. So you can come up with those kind of ideas in your conclusion without really having to support them with research, since you are in your conclusion. The very last thing that you will have in your essay is your works cited page. You should put all of the citations that are on that works cited page in alphabetical order by the author's last name. This is something students forget a lot. So notice in this works cited that the first author listed has a last name that starts with D, then it moves to an M last name, then N, then U, implying that all of them are alphabetized by those authors' last names. This is a sample works cited page, what yours might look like. Remember to always incorporate the citation that you got from the MGA library. Make sure those DOI links or those permalinks at the end of the citation are functional. If I can't find the article, then I can't prove that it is peer reviewed or not. So you need to make it correct and make sure that the citation is correct and that the link is correct so that I can find the articles. Otherwise, you will not be getting the credit for having peer-reviewed journal articles in your essay, which is a required aspect of the assignment. Okay, so that is all from me for this video. Please make sure to start working on your rough drafts if you haven't already. The rough draft is due on the 19th, which is Sunday, so make sure to get that done whenever possible. If you have questions about the research process or finding good sources, please make sure to look at the feedback that was given to you on your topic proposals, because most of the feedback I gave you there was helpful for finding new research, finding keywords to help you in the research, or I even linked some resources to some of you. So please let me know if you have any questions about that or any trouble with it, and I look forward to reading your rough drafts.